Good evening. I want to convene the Tuesday, September 13th, 2018 meeting of the Brattleboro Selectboard. Has the meeting been properly warned?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. First up tonight this is a special meeting. We're here really to talk about the budget, but we're going to allow time for public comment. If there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak to an issue that is not on tonight's agenda, this is the time to do so. Seeing none.
Actually, Guy's asking.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Life is full of surprises.
I know.
All night long.
Mike Fitzgerald, Brattleboro Police Chief. I would just like to remind the audience that we'll be sending out a press release, but as it's getting darker, please, if you're operating a motor vehicle, be extra vigilant. If you're out walking around, wear bright colored clothing. Your windshields get obscured, your headlights get that film on it. It's a night like tonight, the roads are all black, very, very difficult to see. And please, if you're driving, go extra slow, take your time. And if you're a pedestrian, please do not wear dark clothing, something very bright and visible. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, because I almost hit two
advice.
people coming down here. And you don't see them until it's too late, so.
There was somebody on Grove who was very darkly clad.
Yeah.
And also,
very
please
good
turn
point.
your headlights on. I've seen a lot of people driving with only those yellow lights, and that's weird.
Doesn't help either. All right. Anyone else have something that they'd like to say that's not on the agenda tonight?
Does that include us?
Yes.
Oh, I just wanted to give people an update because I was going around the roundabout at Exit 3 and they are repairing whatever bad paint they used for the, I think it's a much more helpful configuration they have now on the roadways to kind of guide people as to how to use the roundabout.
Good.
I agree.
So they repainted the lines. That is the state doing that. We didn't have anything to do with it, but it's good news for the town.
I'm glad to hear that, and I'm hoping they're also cleaning up all of the paint chips that have flown about, because that was a startling amount.
Before we begin under new business, I just want to let everybody know that we are a group of 3 tonight, not 5, because 2 of our members are home under the weather, and I'm sure they're watching us, so we say hi. I guess we'll start off. We're talking about the FY20 proposed budget, and first up is the police department. I think what we're going to do is have the chief explain the budget. And we need to figure out what page we're looking
The
at.
department begins on page 13,
Okay.
near the bottom.
And if anybody is at home, this is posted on brattleboro.org.
Actually, while the chief comes over, I'll just supplement that by saying if you are at home and you want to follow along, if you go to the town's website, brattleboro.org, go to the right-hand side where there's a column that says news and a few particularly significant topics there. One of them is the FY20 proposed budget. Click on that and it'll take you to several different documents that are different pieces of what's in the notebooks that are in front of the select board members. We are in the actual proposed operating budget portion on page 13.
You can take it away.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to present our proposed budget for fiscal year 2020 for the Brattleboro Police Department. What I would like to do, if the board approves, is basically do a general overview of our budget and some of the numbers that I felt might need some explaining, and then open the floor to any questions that you might have concerning our budget.
Sounds good.
Okay. First line I'd like to talk about is the police outside overtime. You would see a reduction in that line of $8,850. Those are services that are contracted out, such as construction jobs, special events, things of that nature. We have been referring those to Windham County Sheriff Department, mainly due to staffing issues that we might have, and also some of the directives that I've given the officers to spend more time downtown and things of that nature. So that's why you see a reduction in that line item. The auxiliary staff, you see an increase in that of $1,000. The reason for the increase is that it reflects the cost to meet the requirements for hiring interpreters for the hearing impaired and things of that nature. We're finding ourselves investigating more and more cases where we have to hire an auxiliary staff. If you look at the previous year, and I'm sure there might be a question about that, why that was so high, that was when we contracted out to the Windham County Sheriff Department for the 3 officers we lost during the investigation of the Black Mountain Road shooting. So that's why it's such a discrepancy from year to year. Normally, we stay around 2,000 for that line item, but we're finding ourselves that to more accurately reflect the services that are there, we should raise that $1,000. Clerical, there was a reduction of $2,990 in our clerical line. That was due to a senior clerk retiring and another clerk coming on and coming in at the entry level. So there were savings there. Building maintenance, you will see a reduction in that line item of $25,700. That initially was planned for the custodial staff for the Brattleboro Police Department up on Black Mountain Road. That cost is now reflected in the new facility maintenance section of the budget. The remaining $10,000 in the building maintenance is for preventive maintenance, semi-annual and annual tests, and any unforeseen events with the building.
Now, can I stop you for 1 sec?
Yes, ma'am.
Where's the facilities maintenance line? Is that somewhere?
That would be on the top of page 13.
Oh, okay.
Facilities maintenance.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
And the reduction occurs not just in the police department, but also at the municipal center and at the library and
So that's folded into...
transportation center.
Okay, so that's folded into that overall number, is that what we're saying? Or is this
Yes,
facilities
yes.
maintenance just...
No, so this newly created program of facilities maintenance is the unit of 4 individuals
Okay.
who've been brought in. They used to be 1 each out at other facilities.
Okay.
But they function as a team now, so we can be more efficient. And
Okay.
so it'll take a couple of years for the budget to actually make sense visually.
Right.
But that's why you see something that's being created new at the top of page 13. And
Okay.
then here in the police department budget, as well as in those other few budgets, the salary cost of those individuals disappearing
And going into here.
and going into
Okay,
there.
makes
Exactly
sense.
right.
All right, thank you, sorry.
Grounds maintenance was an increase of $2,470, and under that line item is the mowings, the landscaping, and snow plowing and snow removal of the facility at the Black Mountain Road. The telephone line is an increase of $3,288, and under that line is the our regular phone lines, our mobile data terminals, which are the computers that we have in the cruiser with our satellite uplinks and things of that nature, building Wi-Fi, and for the cell phones for the different sectors. Equipment maintenance was an increase of $13,000, and that is the increase or the cost of the contract with Axion for our body-worn camera program. And under that is the storage service plan and replacement plan of our body-worn cameras. The overall reduction in the proposed budget is $1,125 less than in fiscal year 2019, or an overall reduction of 0.1% from fiscal year 19. Those what I thought might have some questions from the board on some of the larger numbers, but I'll certainly answer any questions you might have if you want to go much deeper.
May I point out one other
Oh,
thing
yeah.
before we do the questions?
Yep.
Back on page 13, we've talked about this before, but I think it's worth noting that while we are looking forward to the day when we're back up to fully staffed with the police officers, that we have for the last several years run light. And so what happens is we overexpend our overtime account in order to keep enough police officers on the street. And we underexpend our staff salaries. And so you can see that pattern there. And the additional cost, there's a savings in the staff salaries, there's additional cost in not only the overtime, but also in the employee benefits. But the employee benefits, because that's a, one location where we pay for all the benefits for all the different departments, it tends to be an imperceptible difference there. Here within the police department, we do see the increase or the over expenditure of the overtime account and the under expenditure of the salaries.
Because that was going to be one of my first questions, because we have 125 for overtime, 125,000 for overtime, but in 2018, the actual was 229.
Right.
So are we expecting it to be like that same trend for 2000, the current budget
So-
year? It would probably be 229 again, or 200,000
Right, but
again?
we're working diligently to reverse that trend.
Yeah.
But town manager is exactly right. Our over expenditures and overtime is covered by the under spending in our salary line. So financially or fiscally, we're okay there. But operationally, that's not the way you want to do business. We have 3 recruits at the academy that graduate this Friday, and they will be March of 2019, they will be able to go solo. So we're very excited about that.
great.
And then we have 2 going in January. When we historically lose about if I want to get mathematically, 2.3%, we lose a year in officers. So we're anticipating that we will lose 2 officers within a year. But if everything stands as is right now, I'm 1 officer short, which is great news. I mean, really great news. But to put it in perspective, 3 of those officers will not work the street until March of 2019. And the 2 officers that are going in January won't be able to work the streets until September of 2019, so almost a year from now. However, they're in the pipeline. They still do ride-alongs with us. They're very interested. And with consulting with the town manager, what we do is we strategically hire, anticipating that we're going to lose 2 that year. So a year and a half ago, we were 8 short, and so we're making really good strides to that. It just, the nature of the beast with the training, the dates that the academy meets, they meet twice a year. Once in February and once in August. So we have that obstacle to deal with. Very competitive. A lot of departments are short, and it's very competitive. We have a really good program at our department, and a lot of people want to come because of our style of policing. So we get very good qualified recruits. It's just it takes that 10 months from the time they go to the academy, 10 months before I get them. And if the academy's not until, February of 2019 or August 2019, 10 months after that date is when we use them.
Now, has the new salary structure helped? I mean, it's not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it most certainly has. It brought us up to, at least we're in the same conversations with the departments that are more local. Of course, there's some agencies that start off very nicely. And, well, I'll be blunt. If you get an officer that's just looking for a fat paycheck, you're probably not going to be successful working for me. Because we demand the dedication and loyalty to the community. And those are kind of the people that we're finding we're getting. They're not chasing the dollar. So we're getting quality. We're getting really, if some of you have met some of our newer officers, they are fantastic. And the trend is continuing with the next 5 that we have in the lineup. So we're happy with what we have.
Good.
This is not really a budget question, and I'm not sure if someone has asked this before, but do you, I think it's called, you buy out contracts ever from other police departments? Or
I do not.
is
There's
that
some
just sort of
departments
your,
that do.
Is that sort of a policy of your own, or is that a sort of a town policy that we've had for?
I wouldn't say that it's a total shutdown, you know. I guess I ask a lot more questions like why. If you signed a 3-year contract with a department, why are you going back on that contract? So once again, it's not a deal breaker if, you know, there's family issues, you know, things of that nature. I certainly understand that, but if you're working for another agency and you want to come work for our agency and you're under contract, I will definitely look really deep on why you're leaving.
Seems wise.
I would just like to say that I have a lot of pretty one-on-one interactions with your officers, our officers, and they're always wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We've got a very good department.
You have a really good department who are really caring and compassionate and responsive.
I agree.
Anyone have, I have another question, but I don't want to take up all the questions. This is a little question.
Okay.
The overtime, you know, when you're talking about outside overtime, and you're budgeting it because the police officers are going to do less outside overtime.
Correct.
Are they going to do more, like Brattleboro police overtime, or is there going to just be a lessening of the overtime? Because it's my understanding that this overtime is if somebody says, hey, I'm having an event, can I get a better police officer? So it's really not within the police it's not, it's sort of, it's out, as it says, it's outside sort of the scope of what the Brattleboro Police would normally cover. So if they're not covering the stuff that the Brattleboro Police Department wouldn't cover anyway, does that mean they're getting overtime? Are they shifting their responsibilities back to what a normal police officer duty is? If I'm making sense?
Yeah.
Making sense?
If basically, our overtime budget is not for, like what you're probably referring to, like extra patrols downtown and things of that
Right.
nature. That's really not what that overtime budget's
Right.
for. That overtime budget is for like major incidents, court appearances, depositions, covering for trainings, vacations, sick, things of that nature. Ideally, what we do, and we have been very successful, except for the last 2 years, getting money from the Department of Justice. And basically what we apply for is in the range of about $20,000 to $25,000. And I use that money as community policing money. So, and I can use that money to assign officers, extra patrols downtown, things of that nature. That's where that pot of money comes from, to pay those officers. So, not to worry you, but once we get up to fully staffed, now we can permanently assign a shift, an officer to be in certain areas of town while still having the minimum coverage for out west, south, north, and downtown.
But the outside coverage, does that include, you know, somebody that's having an event and they need a police officer to be outside their private event?
Yes,
Okay, but so are they gonna be doing less of that kind of
Yes.
stuff? Okay.
yes.
Already are,
Right.
actually. That's why
Right.
we've reduced the budget to reflect the reality that we've been spending a lot less in that
Right,
area.
and that's to give, because if they're, and I'm not advocating that the police officers are, you know, standing outside people's houses doing traffic control during someone's private, you know, wedding or something. So they're just doing less of that, or are they doing more of other things is my question. Or are we just saying you can't make extra money on the side or something by doing these things?
No, basically what we're doing is giving them some breathing room.
Okay, that's my question.
Yes,
Yeah,
we're giving them some breathing room, because right now, they may be doing anywhere from a 10, 14, 16-hour shift.
Yeah.
And if we accept that outside overtime, now it's assignable.
Yeah.
So you might be doing a 14-hour shift, end your shift, and then have to go and do, traffic control at a construction site for 4 hours.
Yeah, that, you answered that's exactly what my question was. Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
Is this the appropriate time to ask about capital transfer to capital equipment?
We will be specifically going through each of the items that are in the capital request next week when we go through both the capital
Okay.
projects and the capital equipment, but if you...
Well, it was
questions for this.
police related, so I just figured.
Right. Gunny will be back,
Yeah.
but,
Oh, okay.
but if you
It's
If
fine.
you have something you want to ask about now, that's okay.
No, I think I'd rather just wait.
Okay.
Keeps
Okay.
it cleaner.
Does anyone else have any?
I think that's all I have.
Is everybody still happy up at the police department? Is there any?
You're on
You probably
camera.
wouldn't tell me. Yeah.
You're
At the
asking
new
the chief,
building?
they're over the moon. You can see them. It looks like the dwarfs coming to work. They're all skipping and whistling.
I think your specific question is about the new facility.
Yes, the new facility.
They already love the new facility.
Yes, they do. The new facility definitely, because of the workflow, the privacy, the technology on when we're doing interviews, how we're logging and storing evidence, the workflow from processing to officers going back in there and doing their paperwork and things of that nature is just phenomenal. They did a very, very good job. And, as citizens come into the lobby, if they're there to request something from dispatch with the forms, it's immediately taken care of. If they're there for a public records request, they're there. Or if they're there for a personal reason, we can immediately bring them into the room and close the door, and you have privacy. I would say that if there was a complaint that, and it was a double-edged sword, is sometimes people are waiting a little bit longer in the lobby because we're calling officers off the road. They're not in the building. So if it's a north sector call and they happen to be out, you might wait 10, 15 minutes in the lobby before an officer comes out. But once again, it's something that the nature of the beast. We want our officers out on the road. We want them patrolling. So if someone comes into our lobby, the consequence of those is that they may have to wait 10 or 15 minutes. But and I haven't heard any complaints. It's just me observing what's happening in the lobby.
Yeah, I haven't heard any complaints
Good.
either.
You neither, and I would.
All right,
Great.
that's it, I guess. Unless anyone else in the audience has a question.
It's budget season. I'm like,
Good evening, Franz Reichsman from the Finance Committee. I've got a few questions. Some of them are just almost curiosity, but I'm wondering if you could talk about the VBERS VLETs. I know that's some kind of telecommunications thing, but I can't remember any details about it.
That's our state system that we do all our emails through, our Spillman, our checks, motor vehicle. It's basically our brain. That's where we get all our information. If we're looking up past incidents, warrants, like I say, registrations, motor vehicles, things of that nature. It's how we log all our cases. It's where we do our narratives for all our cases, so it's kind of like our files and information center.
Sounds like it's important.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. And now, there's a line item for clothing. Is that a clothing allowance for officers, or what's in there?
Yes. That is the clothing allowance for officers to include all leather gear, things of that nature. Not just shirts and pants, but any gear that they would be issued falls under that line.
And there's $2,000 for crime prevention. How many crimes can you prevent for $2,000? And
Surprisingly,
more seriously, what's in there?
right, I wish, though, that's the line where if we were going to do events for the community, if we were going to go to schools and host basketball events, community events, things of that nature, we use that. We also use that to buy things for the children, like for Halloween, on safe streets, crayons, coloring books, stickers, things of that nature.
So a community relations kind of thing? Okay. Also, I'm a little curious about the body cameras and what's involved in that program. You know, I see the line item that you attributed mostly to maintenance for the system, but I'm a little curious about the bigger picture of how are those used, when are they used, are they all the time, do they have to turn them on, the officers turn them on at a certain time, and how is that program set up and monitored as the whole? And in particular, I'm curious, are there disadvantages to a program like that in addition to advantages?
Okay. I haven't come across any disadvantages, even from all the chiefs that we've spoke to, or the conferences and classes that I've gone to. Not one has started the program and then dropped it, that I'm aware of. So the advantages are great. The cost of the program is, we entered a contractual agreement with Axon, and under that program, it's approximately a little over $12,000 a year, like $12,700 or something of that nature, to where it covers all the software updates, our storage, which was quite large, and any replacements. And then if the hardware is updated at the 3-year mark, if there's a significant amount to where they no longer support the version we have, we get free replacements. So that covers that cost. As to your questions on when they're going to be running and when they're not going to be running, they're going to be running absolutely whenever there is any type of official law enforcement activity. Okay, so motor vehicle stops, they will be running. If we're investigating a crime, they'll be running. Right now, I haven't approved the policy. It's still in the draft form. So, and I'm looking closely before we enter a house, short of exigent circumstances, you will be notified that we are recording, you know, because you do have an expectation of privacy. Victims and witnesses will be notified that we're recording. So short of official law enforcement, if I had to put it in a nutshell, law enforcement functions, we will be recording, and we may not have the opportunity to let you know we're recording. Right now, you're being recorded as we do through our cruiser cameras, and we don't do notifications. So we kind of carried that over with the body worns, with the exceptions of expectation of privacy, and we're addressing that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we're being recorded right now, in fact.
We most certainly are.
No.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? All right. I guess we'll let the chief go until
Till next week.
Yeah, until next week when we summon you back.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Next up is the fire department, and we have Chief Bacassi here.
And that begins on page 12 at the top.
Make sure we ask if they're happy too.
That's right. I'm going to ask if you're happy in your new home.
Good answer.
So if it's okay, I'll follow the same format as Chief Fitzgerald did.
That's perfect.
The only thing different I'd like to do is just kind of give you a brief overview of the department itself so you know kind of what the money is, the budget goes towards. Brattleboro Fire Department consists of 25 paid staff, and that number is broken down into 25 personnel that are actually on shift. They work a 56-hour work week. And then there's the chief, the assistant chief, fire alarm superintendent, and the office manager, who all work a 40-hour week. And we also carry presently 10 members on the call staff. Of the 21 shift people, they're broke out into 3 platoons of 7. They work out of 2 stations, 5 downtown and 2 at Station 2. And they work a 24-hour shift and have 4 days or 48 hours off, so they're always back on duty every 3rd day for 24 hours. We average approximately 2,400 calls a year, and we operate a fleet of 4 engines, 1 ladder truck, 5 small vehicles, and 4 trailers. On the expenditure side of the budget, our increases this year.
Chief?
Can you repeat the vehicle numbers for the
Sure.
engineers?
So the fleet consists of 4 engines, 1 ladder truck, 5 small vehicles, and 4 trailers.
Thank you.
Good. On the expenditure side of the budget, our increases this year, we have a very large increase. This is a killer in the budget. In the utilities line item, which is our water and sewer. This is up $8,200. I even hate to say this number, but almost 191%. But this is due to the size of the services and the water meters that were installed during the design of the project. We've checked our usage carefully and worked with utilities department, and our actual usage is very close to what it has been in the past. It's the base charges on these larger meters that are causing the big cost difference.
So it's actual, hardware that's causing the problem, the meter
Yes,
itself? And why is
there's a
that?
base charge for the different size meters, and the building was designed for, and this is something I couldn't understand until I got the engineers to explain it to me. We don't use more water, we have not more people in the buildings,
Right.
but what we've done is added places where water can be used, I guess is the best way to describe it. So they up the size of the water meters in the mains that actually come into the building.
And we've had some extensive review of this internally because the number surprised us, but then we realized that it was because of the base charges, and that comes all the way back actually to just the basic fairness of the system as we administer it for the users of the utility. So the bigger users who have bigger meters, who have the potential to draw more out of the system, get charged a larger base charge, and then everybody only gets charged for the usage. You'll see on your monthly bill or your quarterly bill, everybody gets charged a base charge, which for our homes is a small base charge, and for bigger commercial facilities is larger. And then everybody gets charged for the actual usage of water. And so the base charge at the fire station increased because the meter there now is larger than the meter was before the project. It was a cost we should have anticipated but didn't. It's approximately $8,000 a year.
And we need the bigger meter because you're saying there's water needs in different
Right.
places. that
There's
weren't
actually the
before.
potential to use more water, so the meter sizes were bigger.
And more, as you said, more places where the water can be drawn from. So to maintain proper pressure throughout the entire building, you have a larger meter.
We learned something.
Yeah.
That's what I
Interesting.
said too.
We actually,
did.
initially, when we were dealing with this as a budget matter, gave some consideration, but just for a very brief time, to adjusting this figure so that the impact within the fire department operations would be level But the impact of that would, we would be treating ourselves differently as a customer of the system than we treat all the other customers
Yeah.
of the system. We quickly determined that wasn't going to be fair, and so we did this instead.
Seems right.
We have an increase of $7,950 in our clothing line item, and that is to get us on a better replacement schedule for bunker gear. This will allow us to purchase a minimum of 4 sets a year to keep a replacement cycle going. The bunker gear, just the pants and the coat alone, cost $2,800 a set. So this increase will help to get us, like I said, on that replacement schedule, as well as to replace damaged gear. It just, I guess as a side note, to totally outfit somebody in the protective envelope that they wear into a building is right around $4,000 now. That includes the helmet, the gloves, the hood, the coat, the pants. So it's expensive to put a firefighter into protective gear. Fire alarm repair, we increased by $2,500, and that is so we can begin to do an annual inspection on our radio tower at Central Station. It was something that we always did, but we just kind of drew the money from where we had it. Now we're actually budgeting for it. Building repairs, we've increased by $500, and that is to help to cover the cost of a maintenance contract on our new overhead doors, which now we have 8 of them. We found that it's much cheaper to do a annual maintenance contract than to just to have them come in and replace something after it's broken. $2,700 increase on propane, and that's just to match the market projections. Some of the decrease, that's the big increases, and I actually believe that's all of the increases. Some of the decreases, we've decreased the call staff or the auxiliary line item by $2,000 or 20%. The reason for this is, unfortunately, we can't maintain a call staff with the numbers that money was in the budget, what it was budgeted for. The people just aren't there anymore that want to belong to a call staff. It's the same problems that you'll see all over where retention or even on a volunteer department just is very hard nowadays to get the numbers. So we decreased that to a more realistic number. Outside overtime, we've decreased by $2,000, and this figure was derived from an average of the actuals from FY17 and 18. Diesel fuel was decreased by $500. This is, we think, is a prudent reduction due to the fact that we've actually reduced the fleet by 1 vehicle that ran a diesel engine. And we're also have a different response protocol where we're using a smaller gas-powered vehicle on medical calls instead of running a bigger vehicle, which will help with the consumption of diesel. And a small reduction of $100 in postage, and that is due to the fact that we're using more email and online forms for inspections and sending out notices. So overall, including the personnel costs, our expenditures are up $67,345 or 3.6%. And though I know we have revenue coming next week, because my revenue line item is so small, I'll just mention here and get it out of the way, that our big change is that we have an addition of $6,000 in revenue, which is being paid for by the Vermont Public Broadcasting Service. They're leasing space on our radio tower at Central Station for their equipment, some of their equipment.
Interesting.
That's all the big stuff.
Any other questions?
The only question I had was when you said bunker gear, is that a brand name or a term of art with the gear itself?
It's, the whole ensemble is just called bunker gear.
Okay.
It's
Just
a
curious,
slang term. It's either bunker gear or protective clothing.
like being in a bunker.
Yes.
In a way.
Exactly.
Okay.
Not a brand name. Got it.
Not Old Navy.
I don't know who this question is for, but there's no building maintenance in the fire department budget as there was in the police department budget. So where does building maintenance come?
Because the building maintenance is actually performed by the firefighters, so there's not a cost. They occasionally have to bring in, just like any other facility, like somebody to deal with a plumbing issue or some other kind of a repair, but the actual ongoing maintenance, we don't have custodial staff at the fire stations the way that we have it at the other facilities, because the firefighters are there 24/7.
Okay, so the building repair line item would be if you had to bring the plumber in.
Bring a plumber in,
That's a building repair.
Right.
yeah.
Bring a specialist in for
Buy a new
whatever.
door for some
Okay.
reason, or,
Okay.
things of that nature,
Okay.
yes.
And then what is we know what the police outside overtime is. What kind of stuff does the fire department do under outside overtime?
Very similar to the police department. It's outside details, what we call fire watch for, one of them, I can't think of the name of it, it's the Circus Smirkus.
Oh, yeah,
Circus
yeah.
Smirkus. A lot of outside events that are held at the high school that aren't high school related, the event sponsors required to get a fire watch by the high school. So things like that. It comes out of the outside overtime instead of our regular overtime.
Because
line item.
you're reimbursed by those organizations to do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And one quick note, I know we talk about this each year, but I think hopefully it's helpful, especially to the public who's watching, to know, both in the police outside overtime and in the fire outside overtime, the revenue offsets the cost. So while we try to be accurate in our budgeting, if we had a year where unexpectedly either there was a lot less than normal or a lot more than normal of outside overtime, the town would recover the cost through the fees that are charged.
All right. Okay. Does anyone on the board have any more questions?
Seems straightforward.
Does anyone in the public have any more questions?
Franz. Bring back my Franz paper.
Franz Reichman from the Finance Committee. Hi, Chief.
How are you, sir?
Good, thanks. The fire department does a lot more than fires, especially in terms of the emergency responses for other situations. And I'm wondering, I imagine you could tell me the number of calls that were fire calls versus medical calls, maybe separated out by motor vehicle calls. I don't know exactly the data you keep, but I'm wondering, is there any way to assign costs within the budget to the different types of calls that you go to? Because I can imagine, a typical fire might eat up a lot more resources than a typical medical response.
Sure.
So do you have any numbers like that?
So, yeah, we don't have them. We can produce them with the new software that we're using, that we just purchased last year. I think part of the answer for you would be that just under half of our calls are medicals, straight medicals, and then the car accidents with injuries are broken out differently than medicals, and then everything else falls into fire calls. But we can certainly get something done up for you.
I'd be interested in seeing it. I can't say it's a real pressing issue, but if you've got the software, I'd love to see that sometime.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I'm not super comfortable with that.
No?
No? Doesn't appear to.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Probably see you again next week. Now we're going to go through the revenues.
Yes.
And what page are we looking at?
Page 1. And the highlights here are the ones that we talked about last week. Excuse me, because there's a few significant changes and they come right up at the top. The investment income we're projecting is going to increase by $58,000. That's because of the change that was proposed by Finance Director John O'Connor and approved by the board this year to move our funds into better interest rate and still keeping them both insured and liquid. So it's just a smarter way without taking any greater risk to earn some money on the, the money we have invested. And it's a substantial change. We expect to get almost $60,000 from that. We have the 2 additional voluntary payments that are being made in lieu of taxes, the combination of which provides an additional $16,000, will provide an additional $16,000 of revenue to the town. And then the current taxes number is just the balancing number when we're done with all the other revenues and what we think will actually raise in income. And then all the expenditures that are proposed, this is the balancing number. That's the 3.69 cent increase or 2.9% increase that we talked about last week. That's a number that's going to change as we go on through the budget process and make changes either in the revenue budget or in the expenditure budget. And meals, alcohol, and rooms, the town's local option tax for those purposes, based on the actual income of $187. That's $421,187 in fiscal year 2018. We're budgeting $420,000 in FY20. We believe that's conservative based on the trend, the multi-year trend that this figure is increasing. There's been a lot of good activity in town around rooms and meals, but both in the eating establishments and in the lodging establishments. But we don't want to take a risk by trying to predict what the additional increase might be in a fiscal year that's not going to begin for another 7 months, almost 8 months, and then won't end it for almost 20 months. We thought the prudent thing to do is just level fund it from the actual receipts last year. Even that will provide us a $55,000 increase over the prior year's budget figure. And then the remaining items are departmental. The department heads for each of those departments is here. They're relatively smaller increases and decreases, but if you have any questions about them, then we'll be happy to answer them.
Does anyone have any questions?
Not yet.
I have a question. And this falls into the town clerk's jurisdiction. I recently was working out in New York State, and I was talking to somebody who's a proprietor of a wine store, and they happened to casually mention to me that the state of New York charges over $4,000 for a yearly liquor license. And I think Vermont is in like 120s or something like that, right? And can you tell me what the town charges?
So it depends if it's a first class or second class. Second class, I believe, is $70 to the state and $70 to the town. And first class, I think, is $115 to the state and $115 to the town.
So we sort of match up with the state charge.
Yep.
I wonder.
It's driven by state statute, so we don't have a choice of how much we're going to receive. We receive what we're entitled to under the state statute.
Right.
So
One thing that we do that not all towns do, some towns don't, is for special event permits, catering permits, things like that. That the state charges a certain amount, and then the town charges $15 per permit as well. So some towns don't do that. Some do. We do.
Okay. So we're not allowed to, we would have to lobby the state in order to get that raised.
That's
Because
correct.
I did look it up nationally, and everybody should know that Vermont is almost dead last as far as what proprietors pay for liquor licenses.
Third class the town doesn't deal with at all. It goes directly to the state, and that's significantly higher.
Which remind us?
Third class is hard alcohol.
Right, okay.
So that's something that the town doesn't approve, the select board doesn't look at, we don't deal with it administratively. Third class and tobacco
yeah.
go straight to the Department of Liquor Control. And we don't deal with it, and we don't collect any money for it
Okay.
at the town level.
So if the town was looking to get any more, and I'm not advocating for a radical change there, we would have to advocate once again to the state.
Correct.
Because the statute does not permit us to raise it any further above what they charge.
That's my understanding.
And likely unsuccessfully lobby the state.
Well, that's interesting though, because
They
like,
need revenue.
I mean, New Hampshire is a little higher even. Massachusetts, $2,000. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
the discrepancy is huge
with ya,
when you think
yeah.
about it. Why do you say that you wouldn't think that the state would?
I just feel like when it comes to any kind of implementation of different rates in municipalities, that the state is highly resistant. And this would be, I think, a classic example of where the state would really push back.
Oh, I guess my question is, why wouldn't
The state
a lobby to raise the state?
Oh, raise it on the state level?
And therefore raise the amount of money?
I guess that would
we-
really just be climate-based. I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Don't you find it?
I do.
very
I find it
interesting.
very interesting.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Thanks. Does anyone else have any questions about under revenue? Looks like everything else is very
Yeah.
small.
Almost unchanged.
We're going to have more
Yep.
dogs, it looks like. And a little revenue from dog licenses, but
And people at home who are reading the revenue pages and listening to things like what Tim just brought up, although you brought it up as a statewide lobby, but if you were to look at it with a municipal lens and look at these revenues and wonder why they're so cut and dry, it's, once again, do some research on the fact that Vermont is a Dillon's rules state, and that really significantly impacts how we can raise money to cover our services in town. And yeah, this is a really good example of that.
now the one thing that's always here and it drives me nuts, besides the dog thing, is, the Chief Fitzgerald left because the whole bike
no.
registration thing.
Do you have to, is that so if your bike gets stolen? What is that?
You
No,
used
he's
to
gone.
have
We
to
can just make up
register your
why.
bike. And now I guess we've lowered for the one person that's going to register their bike, they have to pay $20 as opposed to $21.
It's a voluntary program now. It did used to be a mandatory program.
I know, I was little, we had to do
I
it.
recall, yeah, you got that
But then-
sticker and put it on your bike. But it's a voluntary program. We've talked about actually eliminating it because very few people participate anymore, and it yields virtually no revenue to the town. And on a couple of occasions when we've talked about that, the pushback has been, gee, for the few people who still participate in the program, it does actually give them a level of security if the
Well,
bike
I
does get
wondered.
stolen.
Yeah.
And there's sort of a tradition to it. If the chief were here, he would tell you it doesn't create any sort of a burden administratively for the department. It certainly also doesn't raise any revenue for those who are listening but not following along at home. It's $20 worth of revenue approximately each year.
But last year we budgeted 21, so
Well, we
we're
did.
expecting a decline.
Actually, last year we collected 21 and we're budgeting 20.
I just don't even know what to say.
All right.
Thank you.
So does anyone else have any questions about revenue? Which is basically coming through our
Just staring
taxes.
at Franz, basically.
Well, is this when I bring up my elephant in the room when it comes to revenue?
If you'd like to.
Oh, wait, let me pour some water. Continue.
Let me take a sip. Keep everybody enthralled. As our town manager points out in our notes, the burden this year on taxpayers with the proposed budget, it's not set in stone, of course, is our taxpayers' burden is increasing, it looks like, from 84 to 86% of what we need to run this town. And with all the discussions that we've been having, and I think Peter's been doing a great job, and other people have been doing a great job talking about the hub coalition idea, figuring out, how to address problems we face when dealing with Dillon's rule and trying to find those ways to fund the town outside of our taxpayers' huge contributions. It feels to me that it would be disingenuous to pursue that route, and I think we should pursue that route, without exploring all the ways that we are already, what's the term, permitted, licensed, given the ability to charge monies to folks coming into town using certain things. There's a very important mechanism that we have not taken advantage of. We did talk about it in 2013, I believe, at first. Well, maybe before then. And then 2015 as a follow-up, I believe, as well. And that is the local option sales tax. As you all know, I think we passed the Meals and Rooms, probably wasn't even that long ago. Can anybody remind me?
John can.
10 years, 8 years, somewhere in that
Okay.
range.
2010 or something like that. This year, that small amount, which is 1% added to meals, rooms, and that includes alcohol sales. That's up, as you just heard a little while ago, up 15% from last year. The trend, it's pretty astonishing. I made my own little chart because it doesn't exist quite yet. But it tends to go up. It tends to be a little bit a modest rise and then up pretty impressively, like 15%, 10%, and then a modest rise, I think in the last few years anyway, since I had the records from 2008. So this local option sales tax, which was put forward by the board, I'm not sure, I don't remember I know Dick DeGray had talked about it quite a bit, and the board wasn't fully on board at that time. I don't remember the breakdown of the votes, but it did go forward into our town meeting for folks to consider. And I remember in 2013, I was a town meeting rep and for pursuing this. In 2015, I believe I had stepped down from being a town meeting rep, so I wasn't able to chime in quite as forcefully. But the estimates for that option tax back then, the local option sales tax, unfortunately known as LOST, we might want to come up with a better acronym. But the conservative estimate back then, if the state were to administer it, it was $600,000 approximately, and that's more than we currently make on the increasingly impressive Meals and Rooms tax, which again, from our history, if we look back, there's very good evidence that it's not impacting the success of our downtown or the success of our merchants outside of downtown or our rooms incomes. And the local option sales tax, if people don't remember from all the way back in 2015, it's 1% added onto the sales tax for certain items, and the state does all of the calculations similar to the Meals and Rooms, and they kick back to us 70% or 66% or something like that. So on the local option sales tax, there's a huge list of things that are not included in this category, and that includes medications, fuel for motor vehicles themselves, food, funeral charges, farm equipment, home heating, energy for manufacturing, and most clothing. There are some exceptions to the clothing. So it feels to me in this whole discussion about desperately needing to take a little bit of the burden off of our taxpayers that it's not complete of us to not at least consider the 1% sales tax once again, since it's been 4 years since we seriously discussed it. So that's what I'm throwing out there. And
when are we gonna, we'll just have another discussion of revenues sometime. you know, because that would be the perfect time when all 5 of us are here to put it under a revenue discussion. I mean, would that make sense to you?
Oh, I saw revenue as part of tonight's discussion.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, when everybody's here, we
Like
can talk
another
about
one.
it, have more in-depth
Oh, yeah.
and really talk about it.
That's why we've stacked up all these meetings.
Yeah.
Just about every week.
Yeah, because I don't think this should be our sole discussion on
Of
revenue.
course not.
You know what I mean? And do it when everybody's here and,
Sure, sure.
May I make a suggestion of when I think that might fit well
Yeah.
is, we've got a schedule for the next month or so of which things we'll do on which nights to sort of systematically take the first pass.
Yeah.
But then there's going to be issues that are unresolved because there's going to be some questions that come up where you ask us to bring you additional information, or there's things where, you know, we know there's a couple of different things that are going to come to us from the community.
Yeah.
And so as we get into mid-December and then from there to mid to late January, there'll be 4 or 5 different meetings that are currently not scheduled for any particular purposes. I think that's where you want to come back. That's typically what we do is the first pass through, narrow down the issues, and then you deal with, you know, for as much depth and with as much community involvement as you feel like you need, the pending issues. This could be one of those.
yeah, because I think in this one, we need to do it sort of on the sooner than rather than later end.
I
Because
agree.
it's going to depend on how much money we spend, some people's ideas of,
Okay?
you know what I mean? Like if we only
Okay.
have, you know what I mean? If
Yeah.
we're only dealing with this much revenue or dealing with this much revenue is going to make it, at least in my mind, would,
Sure.
depends on what we're going to spend our money on.
And it may come up more than once, I agree with you.
Right.
Better to bring it up again sooner.
Right.
Do you want to specifically look at that question as opposed to another look at all the revenues? Do you want to specifically look at the local option sales tax next week along with capital
I mean, I think carving has
before we
some
go
time.
deeper into the expenditure budget?
Yeah, I mean, it would be,
What's scheduled for next week?
I don't know, trying to.
Capital.
I'll buy you time. What's
Yeah.
scheduled for next week?
Next week, it's just capital. The reason it's just capital is because it's on a regular agenda, so we have other town business to do.
Well, why don't
And
we-
so the budget piece for next week was going to be just the
Although
capital.
it could increase public
Proposal.
participation if it's on a
Right.
regular.
Then-
meeting,
I think
which
we
might
should
be
do
good.
it, I think, well, there's a couple ways to do it. First, we need to talk about and say, are we serious about bringing it forward? And then maybe give people in the community a chance if they want to weigh in, saying, oh, you're going to bring it forward. You know what I mean, and get more input. This is
Yeah.
basically what we need to do on everything. I think instead of doing it at the end of our budget cycle, talking about a revenue generator, talk about it,
Yep.
you know, sooner rather than later. Because I'm trying to give it the attention it deserves.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I
So-
agree.
Sure.
And
Yeah, I
allow
mean-
lots of input.
I think that would provide people more time to chime in.
Yeah.
And it's something, as we know from last time, plenty of people have opinions about.
Yeah.
Yep.
And maybe like if we do it next week, it's what we would need from, I think it's more like what do we need from town staff to talk about it next week? Is there more info that we need that we can have a discussion about? Well, here are the, you know, here's the things we need to know right now so that we can get an idea of what we're talking about. And then, you know, make sure the public knows, and then maybe at the next meeting or the next meeting, whatever, is have more of a public discussion about it and then make a decision.
Okay.
Does that make sense? I mean, I just want to make sure it gets the attention.
Yep.
It needs to be, if we're going to talk about it, we should talk about it.
Yep.
And not just like, we're going to talk
Like
about
a
it.
carved out actual, because I'm going to tell you that I'm going to support you on it. I've thought about it long and hard, and I've done some asking around to people in the community who I trust, who I think are diehard downtown shoppers, and they agree. They're inclined to support it, and I think it's something that town meeting needs to really look at. We need to be making hard decisions at town meeting, and it's one thing to lay the burden on the back of taxpayers, which feels like it's spread out over more people, and it's really hard to make a specific call for revenue. I think in New England, we specifically have a hard time saying we're gonna make a specific call for revenue. We're, you know, burden barriers by nature, and I think we need to really look at this seriously, and I'm actually really supportive of it. So I just want you to know that.
Yeah, part of the calculation that I sort of had an interesting realization when we had a town meeting, a little bit interesting, where they took our skateboard proposal and kind of ran with it and became quite generous. And that's wonderful, but in generosity, you also have the counterbalance of
You have to.
we have to make sure that we're exploring every option to make the town affordable, because we don't want to collapse under the weight of our own tax burden. I'm really concerned about it.
I am too. Good.
Right, so should we have an initial conversation next meeting and then see what,
Now, for next meeting, would you like everyone to bring suggestions as to what info we might need, or are we going to start the conversation?
well, that's what I don't
Good
know,
question.
what info we think I don't know if we know what info we need.
Well, I know what info that I'd like to request from staff. It's really not too much, I don't think, because, this was provided to me, thanks, Jan, by the way.
There's a
This
lot
is
online.
actually on the Vermont Department of Taxes website,
Right.
and it shows all the exemptions and all of the taxables. And then maybe, a few questions about experiences from other communities. Quite a few towns have it. 12 or 14, maybe. I know Bennington doesn't. And there'll be a discussion on the proximity
Positioning.
to New Hampshire and concerns about that from our vendors. I don't need to make the argument yet, but so I'll come up with a few more questions that perhaps staff could provide us for. Is that okay to throw those out before
Oh,
the
yeah,
next meeting,
definitely.
though? Okay.
Yeah.
Peter, does that feel okay to you from
Yeah, it's
staff
fine.
perspective?
I actually like the two steps, so, I mean, we'll take it
Great.
whenever you have it. We can take it tonight, we could take it by email, any way you want to convey the information you'd like to see brought forward. But because there are two members missing tonight, and because of the importance of this issue, I think it's a good idea that there be some discussion of it next week.
Yep.
And then, sort of some additional framing that comes from that, so that we as staff know, if you don't need that much more from us after next week's discussion, then on the 27th, when we're here for just budget matters and not other town matters, we have the Public Works Department and the Recreation and Parks Department are going to be presenting that night. But, as we see with the hour this evening, when it's just budget matters, I think there's going to be an opportunity to have a really more complete discussion at that point. So if you don't need a lot more information, we should be able to provide it to you for that night.
Yep.
If you do need a lot more information, we've got plenty of additional opportunities as we get deeper into the process. But I
Good.
think you made a really good point earlier that an item of this magnitude on the revenue side could actually substantively change the discussion that you have and the decisions that you make on the expenditure side. So
Yep.
does that sound?
So we plan to
Reasonable.
hear about it for next week, and then we assume that we're going to probably hear again on the 27th. Is that how I'm reading
Yeah,
this?
what I'm anticipating is I want to be careful that we don't bring things out to you in bits and pieces. I think a staff report that addresses the fullness of your concerns and questions would be the right manner to sort of bring something to you to then have a discussion around. So what I'm hearing is, Tim has given thought to it and has already some ideas of what you might need from us. Others of you might want to give some thought to that and either communicate to me between now and next week or at next week's meeting.
Great.
By the time we come out of next week's meeting, not just from the three of you, but from the other two as well, we'll be in a position where, we as staff have sort of the full set of questions from
Gotcha.
the board
Yep.
and can bring you a staff report, whether that's in time for the 27th or as soon after that as we can.
Got it.
Yeah,
Does that work?
Yeah, it does work, and I wanted to reiterate my concern. If the regular meeting is looking too nuts with that agenda, we could make next week's sort of the info gathering, the get it out there.
Exactly.
And then
Chit-chat,
the following.
yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I didn't describe it clearly enough, but that's exactly what I'm
Right,
envisioning.
yeah.
Based on the fullness of what the three of you talked about tonight, that's exactly what I'm seeing, is
Great.
a sort of clearer framing of this next week, and then a full substantive discussion of it the week after.
Sounds good to me.
Okay?
And that should get everybody's juices flowing with their opinions out in our
Excellent.
community.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other suggestions, comments? Anyone else in the public have any comments or suggestions? Nope. Okay, we're done our agenda. Would somebody like to make a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion carries 3-0. Thanks, everybody.
Excellent.
See you next week.
Thank you.
Yep, I'm with you.